it. Under the skies in the rain, Churchill, maybe a bit of advice put on the side as well. I don't know. I just don't get it, Alistair. You can one day you will explain it to me. You haven't done it so far. I think the social networks thing is important. Bobby Charlton example is a good one. I think he fell out with his mum though, so I'm not sure. Sometimes social networks do come apart. And I just wanted to also note there's a danger here that we just rubbish everything that's happening at the moment. And of course, in the area of mental health, there's some really important stuff going on. There's a Start Mental Health team in South London that work with some of the most excluded, chaotic people, and they do a fantastic job. Similarly, in Westminster, we have the Joint Homelessness team. We've now got this new service, this new doctor service that people like Petra, my colleague, can probably talk to you more about, but going out onto the street, working with people who are in poor physical health and poor mental health. The other point I want to make while I've got the floor is that Thames Reach was instrumental in getting somebody sectioned, a woman up in North London sectioned in around about October of last year. I'm absolutely proud of the work we've done with that person. It took a long time. It was a specialist intervention. She came off the street into hospital, now in a residential care home. The members of the public who were giving her food on the street at the time and probably helping to keep her there now visit her in the residential care home. If she wasn't in that residential care home come December, she probably would have died. There is a case occasionally for sectioning people, but of course the assessment is the important thing, because if people can come off the street voluntarily, brilliant. But, I've been to a funeral to try to explain at the funeral to the children of the man who died why it was we gave him the right to die on the street. And believe me, it may play out well here. It plays out very badly at the funeral.
Thank you, Joe. We're going down the panel and I've got 3 questions.
I wanted to say thank you to the gentleman in the back who expressed what I had been trying to say about mental health much better than I did. I think people have, I agree broadly with what's been said. I just would say that a hotel is not a home either. So there's something about, how we think of these things, and that a gym, is not the same as a relationship, and that sort of thing. I think, but I wanted to pick up on the issue made by the gentleman who talked about the quality of staff, the quality of workers. I know there will be a lot of staff here, there's a lot of my staff here, so I probably need to be quite careful about what I say. But they will know that I give them a really hard time. And they're not well paid. The government, people, donors, everybody wants this work on the cheap. But what we're asking staff to do, and volunteers, the skills that we're asking them to have are actually, they are really, really intense social skills. And it's tough to learn, really tough to learn. And I think there is something about how we recognise that, particularly if we're not talking about problem solving, if we're not talking about filling in housing application forms, if we are talking about how do you build a bounded and appropriate therapeutic relationship with another person. That's a tough call. And it can be done, but it's not easy, and it needs to be enduring, and we need to be committed to it. So there is something about how we work and the quality of what we do, and it is not okay to give people second best or third best or whatever. So for us as organisations, we're charities, we like being nice to our staff, but actually expecting the highest standards and sort of pushing it to the limit is kind of what we need to do. But, I'm very aware that the rewards that we can give people, financial rewards, are not, as high as they should be. And there are funders out there who want us to do it on less. So I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you. We're going straight, finishing on the line, and I'm going to come to questions. Come on, Nick.
I agree with a lot that's been said. Just want to pick up on 3 points that's been made from the floor. Mental health, in terms of what can be better. I agree there's a lot of good stuff going on out there at the moment. The most encouraging thing for me in the last year has been seeing agencies coming together to actually focus on the most entrenched. So voluntary sector, but statutory organisations as well, including the police, to actually try and actually really target resources into those who've been identified and have been on the streets for years and who've been mentally ill to actually try and make a difference there. We, at the Passage, we've been involved in terms of people being sectioned. Every person I've ever seen being sectioned at the Passage was deeply distressing, but was absolutely right to do. So bringing people together to focus and share resources, and that includes hospitals actually not discharging people back onto the street. There's some great hospitals that have some great protocols that work really well. That kind of needs to be shared out a little bit to make sure that no hospital ever does that. Good and bad workers, great point made. Agree with everything that everyone said on this.
Do you agree that housing association staff are rubbish, though?
Do you run? You're not a housing association.
No, but that's what he said. You need to answer that very specifically.
How can he? How can he? Because they're going to be good, bad, and indifferent, as in most organisations,
Well, he's making,
including the big issue.
well, he's making quite a general point, and the interesting thing about it is that, in relation to what you're saying, John, I do think the housing associations are not necessarily always on our side. So, if they give you a figure of the number of people that haven't stayed in their accommodation, I'd say that's a really flawed figure. Not because they're rubbish, but because of their priorities not being the same as ours.
They're giving us the figure because they are not equipped to take up problems that start in our sector. Well, they start before we get involved. We get involved, and then, unfortunately, because we can't transform them, they then move on. And therefore, the housing associations are being keyed up by government, by local authorities, and they are getting the money now to kind of co-opt some of the skills that already exist in our sector for dismantling poverty, dismantling the problems that keep people in poverty.
They're just plucking a figure out of the air to give to you.
They're not.
giving you-
No,
We're going to come back to you, John, and I'm going to get to Mick. Let me finish what you're saying.
Sorry.
Okay.
I can't really talk about housing associations. I have views on housing associations, but the thing I can talk about is in terms of my own organisation, and the 2 points I'd make around good and bad work is culture. Is the first one's really important. There's someone in this room tonight who no longer works for the Passage, but was kind of instrumental in terms of turning some key cultural aspects around in the organisation to make it better, introducing that clients have a greater voice in terms of shaping services. And the second thing is volunteers. Volunteers really just say it as it is. They really challenge you because they've got nothing to lose. I'd like to think the staff don't feel they have anything to lose, but I guess they do. They think I might lose my job. But volunteers say as it is. We have a major CEO from a major bank come in and volunteer. He's just bossed about by all the volunteers. He's told, you're not on the toast, you've got to do this or whatever. They don't care, they tell you as it is. So, you've really got to shape the culture to make sure that the workers that you have are good. And the final point around volunteers, great role to play. I'd love to see Housing Justice playing even a greater role in terms of the kind of community stuff, in terms of the point I was making about interdependence, and also on street teams. Jeremy's organisation have a great track record around volunteers involved in their street work. It's something that we're trying to pursue. So the more volunteers, the better.
Thank you. I'm going to just give John, and then we'll come back. Yep.
Yeah, you just make a point. 150 years ago, when Providence Road was started, there was a vast amount of the British working class who were sleeping in the streets. For instance, the vast amount of dockers were sleeping in the streets. They would work because they couldn't afford the rent. And there was an economic reason why people lived in the streets. So they were just kind of ordinary people who were on the streets. What has happened over the years is that the numbers have got smaller, but still, after the Second World War, there were new lots of people coming onto the streets. My big argument is not so much that people are mentally ill who are on the streets, but they become mentally challenged. They become very, very difficult to get out of the problems. Some of them can go, I don't know if you know about the sea. The sea's like this. The deeper you go, the less oxygen. The fish at the top swim faster than the fish at the bottom. And we get homeless people who come in and they're in and out like that. And then we get people who move a bit slower and then a bit slower and a bit slower. And some of them who move with the speed of an injured slug. And the reason for that is because homelessness is like, it manifests itself in that particular way. There are all sorts of things you can do to get people off the streets. Some of the things are things like what Jeremy's done, which is actually take people who may have had a bit of a rocky beginning, but employ them.